Hello, welcome to the second of these presentations for the Introduction to Linguistics seminar. Today we're going to be concentrating on vowels in phonetics. So we're going to be looking at how vowels are produced using the vocal apparatus. Now, vowels are unlike consonants in many ways. A consonant we saw last week is something that we produce by interfering somehow with the airstream in the vocal tract. Now, clearly, because of that, consonants are fairly easy to describe in terms of what's actually going on with your tongue, your lips, or whatever. Vowels, on the other hand, there's no interference with the airstream when you produce a sound like ah or eh. Okay, you're not actually doing anything to alter the flow of air. It's a completely free flow of air. And that in itself is going to make the description of vowels quite difficult because, well, what are you actually doing if you're not interfering with the airflow? And how is it that we can actually produce different vowels in that particular way? Because if you're not doing anything with the airflow, why is E different from or, etc.? So clearly then, it's not going to be so easy to describe a vowel. And in fact, in order to be able to describe them, we're going to have to understand something a bit more about the physics and the physics of sound and the anatomy of the apparatus that is used to produce those sounds. So, first of all, let's start with how it is possible that we actually make vowel noises. Okay, now, one thing about vowels is that they all involve voice. Now, we've seen voice last week in terms of consonants. Voicing is to do with vibration of your vocal cords in your glottis. Okay, and all vowels make use of that vibration. Okay, so we make use of the vocal folds or the vocal cords. That's these things here. This is a picture of John with his head cut off, only this time he's cut off at the neck, just above his glottis, so we can actually look down into it and see the trachea going down into his lungs. Those things there, those bits of skin, the vocal folds or vocal cords, are the things that vibrate. Okay, now these you can do things with these. You can leave them open like we've got here. So when they are pulled apart, air flows through them into the oral and nasal cavities, or you can actually pull them closed. You can pull them tightly closed and prevent any air from getting out. And that's exactly what happens when we produce a glottal stop or a cough. We close off the vocal folds, let the pressure build up behind them, then suddenly open them, and you get a cough comes out. Okay, but you can do other things with these things. You don't have to pull them tightly together. You can hold them fairly loosely close together. Now, that's what happens when you produce voice. Now, to understand what's going on with that, imagine these two lines represent the vocal folds themselves and the space between them. Now, if you hold your vocal cords close to each other, but loosely close, so they're not actually blocking anything, basically before any air flows between them, the pressure on all sides of your vocal folds is equal. Okay, and because the air pressure from inside and outside is equal, nothing happens. They just remain where they are. But when you do press air through them, now physically this has a definite effect. And what that does is it actually reduces the pressure between them where the air is flowing through. So you'll get less pressure at that point. Now, given that you've reduced the pressure between them, that means that the pressure on the outsides of them is greater And what that's going to do then is force them together. So your vocal folds will come together and touch. Now, at that point, then you get a closure, and closures are going to form a blockage, which will cause the air pressure behind that blockage to increase. And of course, with increased pressure, that's going to force them apart. And so essentially what's going to happen as you breathe through your vocal cords, there's going to be alternating pressures on them, forcing them closed and forcing them apart, forcing them closed, forcing them apart, and so forth and so on. You're going to get basically vibration, okay? And it's that vibration which causes voice. Now, there's something else we need to know about vibration to know how this vibration causes different vowels. And we can look at this vibration by use of a stringed instrument. Now, a stringed instrument has got strings attached to two fixed points between them, and what you do is you pluck or bow or cause these strings to vibrate, and then the noise will come from them. Now, you might think, well, a string, when it vibrates between 2 points, is simply going to go up and down like that. Well, yes, it does do that. It does move up and down between those two fixed points. But something more complex happens than that. So not only does the string vibrate between the two fixed points, but it will also vibrate half of the string around a central point as well. And you'll get this kind of vibration. Now, that kind of vibration involves a smaller part of the string moving up and down. And a smaller part of the string, when it vibrates, will create a different frequency. A long string vibrating up and down produces quite a low frequency, but half of the string vibrating up and down will cause a higher frequency. And this isn't the end of it either, because not only will the string vibrate in halves, but it will also vibrate in thirds. So a third of the string will be going up, and a third will be going down, and a third will be going in the opposite direction. And again, that will create a different frequency. And furthermore, it'll do it in quarters too, up and down across the quarters. So we get actually quite a lot of vibration, and it doesn't end at that. The string actually vibrates in a very, very complicated way, and all this vibration is happening at the same time. Okay, so not only is it the whole thing moving backwards and forwards, but half of it is moving backwards and forwards, a third of it is moving backwards and forwards, a quarter of it is moving backwards and forwards, a sixth of it is moving backwards and forwards, etc., etc., all at the same time, all of those producing different frequencies. And that's why stringed instruments produce such a rich sound, quite it's not a pure note that gets produced, but a very rich sound with one frequency built onto another. Okay, so a vibration of a string produces lots of frequencies all piled up on one another. Now, in comparison to a string, the vocal cords are even more complicated. So when a vocal cords vibrate, you get a very, very complex set of vibrations happening, all of which producing their own frequencies. So the human voice is actually a very rich sound in its raw state. Okay, now that's one part of things that we have to understand how we get different types of vowels. Another is something called resonance. Now, I think we've probably all done this. If you take a bottle and you blow over the top of it, it produces a sound. It produces a pitch. What's going on there? Why does the blowing across the top of a bottle produce this note? Well, what's happening is that as you're blowing across the top of the bottle, you're causing all the air molecules at the very top of that bottle to bounce about. and they bounce about and they hit into each other and they hit into the side of the bottle and they basically vibrate. And they vibrate at different rates because they're all being rather randomly juggled together. And so you'll get vibration of air molecules. Not that very many of them. You won't really hear very much of it. It's that kind of hissy sound, all the different frequencies of the air molecules all together vibrating and bumping into each other. The reason why you actually hear a louder and more pure note is not because of those molecules themselves vibrating and bumping into each other, but it's because of the air that's inside the bottle. Now, bodies of air have this property called resonance, whereby they will also vibrate whenever they are in close proximity to something else that's vibrating. So the air molecules that are vibrating at the very top of the bottle will cause the air inside the bottle to vibrate. But, and this is the main thing, the air inside the bottle will only vibrate in sympathy with some of the vibrations, particular frequencies of vibrations of the air that's being juggled about at the front. So what that will do is create an amplification, as it were, of some of those frequencies being produced by you blowing across the top of the bottle. And that's the note that you will hear because there's a greater body of air all vibrating at those particular frequencies. Different bodies of air will produce different resonant frequencies. They will resonate with different frequencies, as we can tell by if we take our bottle and we fill it partly with water and you blow across the top, well, you'll get a different note. Typically a higher note. So the smaller bodies of air resonate with faster frequencies, higher notes, and bigger bodies of air resonate with lower frequencies or lower notes. Okay, so now we understand vibration and the complex nature of vibration and resonance as being a way of picking out some of those frequencies and amplifying them. Let's apply that to the human vocal system. Okay, so here we've got John again with his head cut in half sideways, and we're looking in at the oral cavity. Now, the oral cavity is a cavity. It's a hole, and it's a hole filled with air. Now, the thing that we know about bodies of air is that they vibrate in sympathy with certain frequencies. And it depends upon the shape of that body of air as to which frequencies it's going to vibrate in sympathy with. We also know that the human vocal folds, when they vibrate in a very complex way, producing lots and lots of different frequencies. And therefore we can understand what's happening with vowels in terms of what we actually do with the body of the air inside the oral cavity to produce different resonant frequencies by changing its shape. And of course, the way you change the shape of the air inside your mouth is by changing the shape of your tongue. You can bunch your tongue up in one place and lower it down in another. If you bunch it up at the top and towards the front, you get a sound like E coming out. On the other hand, if you bunch it up at the back and lower it at the front, you get a sound like ooh coming out. Okay? And of course, those are different vowel sounds. So in order to produce different vowel sounds, what you've got to do is move your tongue to change the shape of the body of air within your oral cavity. Okay, so that's what's actually going on then. Now, of course, it's quite difficult to represent exactly the shape of the tongue inside the oral cavity. You don't want to draw something like the side of John's head every time you want to represent what's happening with your tongue. So linguists tend to simplify things. What they do is represent this space inside your oral cavity as a kind of a diagrammatic way using this particular shape. Note, this shape is bigger at the top than it is at the bottom, and what that represents is the fact that your tongue is fixed at the bottom, where the root of your tongue is actually affixed to your the bottom part of your jaw. Therefore, it's less mobile. It can't move too far forwards and backwards when it's at the very bottom. But if you move it higher up into the mouth, then it has more mobility. So there's a greater space that it can move. So we use this shape here to represent, in an abstract way, the space that we have to move your tongue about in. Okay, all right. So this is the vowel space. And note, we can talk about the vowel space in terms of various dimensions. For example, there's a front part to it, the bit with the pointy bit at the front. That represents towards the teeth. The back part represents the bit towards your velum and back part of your oral cavity. Okay, so we can talk about vowels which are front vowels and which are back vowels. And between the two of them, we have a line representing the center between the front and the back. We then have the other dimension, the up and down dimension. Okay, at the very top towards the roof of your mouth, we call those that position the close position or closed position, because when you raise your tongue up there, you are getting closer to the roof of your mouth, or you're closing off the vowel space. Whereas if you draw your tongue down to the bottom, you are opening up the vowel space. So those are called open vowels. And in between close and open vowels, we have two midpoints that we make use of, the mid-close and the mid-open position. Okay, so we can identify various areas within the vowel space as to where vowels are produced. And when we say where vowels are produced, what we simply mean is where is the bulk of the tongue placed in order to produce different vowels. Okay, so if you bunch your tongue up high towards the front, then we have a front close vowel. If you bunch it up to the back, but also high, it's a back close vowel. Okay, so we can refer to different vowels by this method. Okay, let's have a look at some vowels of English, see how they're produced. First of all, we'll start with something called the monophthongs. Mono means one, and thong means sound in Greek. This is therefore single sounds. Quite what that means will become more apparent when we start looking at other vowels. But for the sake of it, let's just go through some of these. Okay, we'll start off with a fairly close front vowel in English. This is the vowel I. It's represented in the IPA using these brackets to indicate that it's an actual sound, a square bracket. It's an actual sound by what looks like a capital I, but it's smaller than a capital I. So when you actually see it written down next to other letters, you'll see that it's actually quite a small symbol. But anyway, this is the symbol for I, as in the word fit. Now, slightly further down, we have the vowel E, okay, represented by the letter E, as you might expect for this sound, as in the word bet. Now, we can see that this vowel is lower than the E, is more open. If you go between those two vowels yourself, you pronounce them, go E, 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 E. You can feel your tongue moving up and down as you say those two things. So E is clearly a lower vowel. But note, the tongue doesn't move backwards and forwards. There's very little backwards and forwards movement between E and E. So both of these vowels are front vowels, but the E is more of a mid-front vowel rather than a close front vowel. Then we have this sound. Okay, now is fairly similar to in its height, but it's further towards the center of the mouth. So if you go between You can't actually feel your tongue moving up and down very much, but you can feel it moving backwards and forwards. So is produced more to the center of the vocal space here. Note also, differs from both I and in as much as it's a long vowel. It has length to it, as opposed to which is a short vowel. Length in the IPA is represented by these two dots that follow the vowel. So is represented as a long vowel, I, are both short vowels. Finally, as part of the set of vowels which are produced at the front, we have a very open vowel, ah. This vowel is so open, in fact, that you have to move your jaw downwards in order to pronounce it. So not only do you just move your tongue down, but your whole jaw has to drop. So if you go between e, ah, your jaw is actually moving up and down. This is the vowel that we get in words like bat, for example. Okay, it's a short vowel, so there is only one long front vowel. Let's move to the back. We've got u, as in foot. Okay, this vowel is a fairly high vowel, a close vowel produced at the back, similar in height to I. So if you go between I, u, I, u, I, u, I, that's a movement backwards and forwards with your tongue rather than up and down. Slightly further down and perhaps a little further back, we've got the O vowel. Okay, both of these vowels are short note, o, o. O is in words like lot, cot, etc., etc. Now, slightly further down and towards the center again, we've got the vowel, but. Okay, this vowel, represented by an inverted V, simply because we need more symbols to represent vowels with. But this is a vowel that is actually quite varied across accents of English, not just British English, but also elsewhere. Standard Southern British English uses this vowel as in, as I said, but. In the north, they don't actually have this vowel at all. In the north, they would use the U vowel, and a word like which would be pronounced in standard British as but, is actually pronounced as but. Okay. Now, unfortunately, I come from an area of England which is part of, in this respect, the north of England. And so I actually, my pronunciation of this word is but, which makes it quite difficult for me to actually produce this to order. So I will often make mistakes when pronouncing this vowel, but you'll just have to forgive me for that. My accent is such that I've got one less vowel than standard British accents do. Other accents actually have another way of pronouncing this vowel, and we'll briefly talk about that towards the end of this slide. Okay, moving on, we have another mid back vowel, but this time further back, and that is or. Note this is long, bought. It's a long vowel as opposed to the other three, which have been short so far. Finally, at the very bottom, a very open back vowel, and again a long one, is the R vowel, as in barred. Now, the one vowel that's missing from this is this one here. It's the one that's right in the middle. Basically, it's the vowel that you get if you just relax your tongue and mouth and make a noise. So this is It's a short vowel. We get it, say, for example, at the end of the word the, when pronounced the, as opposed to the, where it isn't obviously pronounced as a. Now, this one is actually a very special vowel in English for all sorts of reasons. And for that reason, it's actually got a name. We call this a vowel schwa. Okay, so this vowel, written as an upside down E, is the schwa vowel, a central mid vowel. Okay, now it's special in some accents because this vowel is only ever used as an unstressed vowel. In standard British accent, that this vowel here is only ever unstressed. Elsewhere, however, you can get a stressed version of it. For example, in most of America, they stress schwa, and they use it for what in standard British English would be the vowel, as in but. Okay, so while Northern British pronounce it but, and the Southern Standard British pronounces it but, in American English it's pronounced more like but. It's the same vowel as the vowel, but stressed. Okay, so yeah, there is some variation with these vowels depending on which accent we're talking about. Okay, now then, let's move on to look at another set of vowels called diphthongs. This comes from di, meaning two, and thong, meaning sound, two sounds. So basically what we're looking at here is a vowel that is produced using two separate sounds, one following the other. Okay, that's what a diphthong is. It involves a movement of the tongue, essentially. The second sound can either be a glide, that is y or w, or it can be another vowel. Typically it'll be schwa, although we'll see there are other possibilities where things get slightly more complicated. Okay, let's look at the diphthongs with y and a w. Okay, consider these words, flee and chew. Now, often you will see these represented like this, flee and chew. Now, note the vowel symbol that's used there is actually a long monophthong. Okay, that's supposed to represent this E sound and oo sound. Now, that represents an older pronunciation of this that is referred to as received pronunciation. And received pronunciation more or less died out in British English in the 1960s. Very few people speak with an RP accent, even though you'll get people claiming that they do. The actual RP doesn't really exist anymore, and yet these symbols are still used to represent the sounds that we use instead of these even to today. And the reason for that is mainly due to an author called Gimson, who wrote Pronunciation of English, a guide to pronouncing English, in 1962, just at the time that this accent itself was in its on its deathbed. But because he'd been brought up to believe that this particular accent had a certain amount of prestige, he decided to continue to represent it. The fact of the matter is that this book is still being published and used in universities to teach students pronunciation, and this causes quite a bit of problems. This is an instance of what is RP. Let me play this for you.
Mind the gap. Stand clear of the doors, please.
It was recorded sometime in the 1950s by a British actor. And in the 1950s, if you were an actor and you didn't speak with an RP accent, then you wouldn't be employed very much. So all British accents, all British actors used an RP accent, and that there is an example of what RP sounds like. Very, very few people sound like that these days. In particular, if you concentrate on that last word, please, stand clear of the doors, please. Okay, note, please is a long monophthong, E. And the same thing with chew, would have been pronounced chew, chew. Okay, a long monophthong. These days, they are pronounced as not E, but E and oo. Okay? Note at the end of those, there is a glide, E, to over exaggerate it, E and oo. So you get a Y at the end of the E and you get a W at the end of the oo. Okay? So instead of please, it's please. Instead of flee, it's flee. And chew is chew. Okay? Very different pronunciations. And this is the current standard British pronunciation. Okay? These are then vowels that end in a glide. They involve a movement of your tongue to produce them. So they're not monophthongs, but they are, and they're still vowels, even though they involve these glides. Now, if you want to see more detail about this, there's a very good video on YouTube by a guy called Jeff Lindsay called Why These English Phonetic Symbols Are All Wrong. And you're welcome to go and have a look at that if you want to find out more about what's going on there. Anyway, let's move on to look at another set of diphthongs. These are ones that actually start somewhere and end with a schwa. Okay, so they move between two vowel positions. Let's take the first couple, here and hair. If you think about those vowels, ear, air. Ear starts at the E position and ends at the schwa position, ear, ear. Whereas air starts at the E position and ends in the schwa, air, air. So these two are vowels which move towards the schwa, the central position. There's a third one which is also not so common these days. Again, it seems to have gone out with the real RP accent, and that's this one. The pronunciation of this word as poor, poor. It starts with an oo and ends with an Most people these days wouldn't pronounce it like that. They would just pronounce it as paw, i.e. with a long monophthong, and a central back monophthong. But you can still hear people using this, and there are certain accents in Britain, particularly in the north, where they will pronounce this as poor. Okay. These are called centering diphthongs for obvious reason, that they all start off at the peripheries of the vowel space and move towards the center. Now, there's a whole bunch of other diphthongs where actually the end point to them is the E and the oo. Now, as we've already said, E and oo are diphthongs themselves that end with a glide. Now, anything that ends with these things is going to therefore start off in one place and move towards the E position and end with a glide. Let's have a look at some of those. We've got late, A. It starts at the E position and moves up to the E position, eight, late. Okay. Another one is fly, I. Starts with near to the R position, not quite up there, but moves up to the E position, I. And boy, that's the oi vowel. Okay, starting close to the O vowel and moving up to the E vowel, oi. Okay, now we call these three diphthongs front closing vowels. They're closing vowels because note, they all start off in a lower position, in a more open position, and move towards a close position. Okay, so they are moving towards a closing position. Furthermore, they are always moving to that front close position, the E position. These are different from the back closing vowels like O. Okay, O starts off near to schwa and ends with the oo. Remember, oo is a diphthong with a glide at the end of it, oo. So go. And ow, as in now. Okay, starting with that very open front vowel a and ending up with the oo, ow. Okay, those are back closing vowels. Okay, so let's summarize quickly what we've been through. We've seen that there are monophthongs and diphthongs. Monophthongs are produced with a stable tongue position, whereas diphthongs are produced with a movement of the tongue. In the monophthongs, we've got a basic distinction between front and back vowels and between close and open vowels. That's the two dimensions on which we can place particular vowels in terms of where you bunch your tongue up mostly. Okay. There's also a distinction to be made between long versus short vowels to do with the length of the vowels. And we've also mentioned the distinction between a stressed and an unstressed vowel. We won't go into too much about that at the moment. With diphthongs, we've got those which actually incorporate a glide towards the end of them, and they differ from those that end with vowels. Sometimes those vowels also end in glides as well, so you get two vowels and a glide with them. We've got those which are centering, these ones which just end with the schwa, and the ones which are closing. The closing ones also come in two varieties, the ones that move to a front close position and ones that move to a back close position. Okay, that's as much as we need to have, and I'll see you in class. Bye.